Hello and welcome back to the Fantasy Playmakers. What's up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be doing another mock draft, and this setup was requested in one of my prior videos. So it's going to be a standard scoring league, 10 teams. We're going to be drafting from the 9th overall slot, and then just a standard roster setup: one quarterback, two running backs, two wide receivers, a tight end, a flex, and then 7 bench slots. I'm just not going to be drafting kicker and defense. I would draft kicker in second to last round, and then defense in the last round. If you guys have some other setups that you want me to mock draft from, comment those down below. And then if you enjoy the video, just please leave a like and subscribe to the channel. But let's get right into the draft. All right, so to start off the first round, we saw 3 straight running backs come off. It was Christian McCaffrey, Derrick Henry, and then Dalvin Cook. Then we had Tyreek Hill thrown in here at the 104. That is a very, very strange pick. I mean, that would even be strange for PPR. Standard scoring, you've got to go running back there. And if you are going to go wide receiver, it would have to be Devontae Adams. So then after that Hill pick, it was Aaron Jones, Ezekiel Elliott, Nick Chubb, and then Alvin Kamara, which leads into our pick here at the 109. So let's take a look at who is on the board. I think I want to go running back here just because with the standard scoring settings, that definitely elevates running backs even more. And I'm already someone who likes to go running backs early and often, so I'm going to be locked in on that position here. We've got Jonathan Taylor, Saquon Barkley, Antonio Gibson, Najee Harris. You've also got Joe Mixon and Austin Eckler even farther down the rankings. But since this is standard scoring, you're probably not going to be looking at some of those pass-catching backs. Eckler's a PPR machine, not as much so for standard. And I think I'm going to be leaning on Jonathan Taylor here just because I think he's going to see a huge share of the carries on this Colts team. The issue for him is that he's not going to have a ton of involvement in the receiving game, but that's obviously not as big of a deal for standard scoring. So he is going to dominate on the ground. He was carrying it around 20 times per game towards the end of last season once he fully took over as the workhorse. So I think he's almost like a Nick Chubb-esque player, maybe a little bit less efficiency. But look at that, almost 1,200 yards in 15 games as a rookie, and that was with him struggling to basically win that job until the last 6 weeks of the season. So I'm going to lock in with Jonathan Taylor here as my RB1. Plus, it looks like Wentz and Nelson are looking good to play week 1, so that's even better for Taylor. After we picked Taylor, the 10th team had back-to-back selections, and they went with Saquon Barkley and Davante Adams. And that's actually going to leave us with a pretty interesting selection here, just because we do have Travis Kelce off the board. And in my half-point PPR rankings, every single player that's been picked is in my top 11. And so Travis Kelce would be the number 12. But I am just going to take a look at some of the other positions, probably running back preferably. I think Gibson, Harris, and Mixon are all very solid picks here just because they're going to be getting a ton of volume on the ground. And that's really what you want to be targeting. But I do think I could go with Travis Kelce here just because if I'm looking at the board, I think there are a lot of these later round running backs that honestly fit pretty well for standard scoring. You've got guys like Gus Edwards, Darrell Henderson, Mike Davis, Damian Harris, all these guys that are going to be going in like the 5th, 6th round or later. I do think I could have them as solid like RB3s. So I'm going to go with Travis Kelce here and then hope that some value falls to me in the 3rd round. I'm not someone who picks Travis Kelce, like mid 1st round, but we're talking about a 2nd round pick, 12th overall player. I think that is a fairly appropriate spot to pick him. So my tight end position is just going to be off the table, and I won't have to worry about it for the rest of this mock. So to finish out the 2nd round, we saw 3 of those running backs that we were considering with our pick at the 202 go off. So Gibson, Mixon, and Najee Harris, and then 5 straight wide receivers with Calvin Ridley, A.J. Brown, DK Metcalf, Stephon Diggs, and Justin Jefferson. And then in the 3rd round, we saw every position come off the board. The 2 tight ends, 2 quarterbacks, a wide receiver in DeAndre Hopkins, who that's a pretty big fall to the 304, and then some running backs, Eckler, Montgomery, DeAndre Swift. And from what I'm seeing, there's still going to be some value on the board here at running back and wide receiver. For me, it's too early to go quarterback. I'm just not going to be looking at that position in the 3rd round. But at running back, we've got CEH and Chris Carson. I think both of those guys are solid picks here. And then we also have a lot of top options at wide receiver: McLaurin, Evans, Allen Robinson, CeeDee Lamb, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper. All these guys are very, very high, top picks here. But I think I'm going to go running back, and this is the reason why. There's way more depth at wide receiver, so I think I can go out, get the running back 2 that I want, and I'm still going to have a wide receiver that I'm very fine with slotting in as my wide receiver 1. And the top running back, in my opinion, is going to be Clyde Edwards-Helaire. He's someone that I don't think a lot of people attribute to having a ton of volume, but we saw at the beginning of the season last year, he was getting a ton of touches, a ton of work on the ground, and honestly, the kind of disappointing aspect of his game, obviously besides the touchdown scoring, was his lack of involvement in the receiving game. He was still being targeted, but just not as much as people expected, so he will get it done on the ground, and I feel very solid having him as my RB2. After CEH, it was Julio Jones and then Chris Carson, which leads us into our 4th round pick here. And we really want to be going with the wide receiver position here. We can go out and get our wide receiver 1. There are honestly a ton of players we could consider here at wide receiver. I mean, Terry, Mike Evans, Robinson, Keenan Allen, Amari Cooper. I like all of these guys here. We probably want to lean away from those volume guys. Keenan Allen is a great pick for PPR scoring. I just don't know about it for standard. Honestly, a staple who is a monster in standard scoring is Mike Evans. Let's just look at his year-by-year finishes. And the reason why I feel so solid with him is because he doesn't need a ton of volume to perform. He's going to be getting that yardage on a year-to-year basis, and he's going to be getting into the end zone. Yeah, so look at this. 2016, he was the first overall player in standard points per game. Then in 2018, 2019, 2020, 6th, 8th, 8th. That is just top level consistency. And people want to rip him for his 12 touchdown receptions last year, saying he's going to regress. First off, he put up 12 in 2014 and in 2016, and this is a much better offense with Tom Brady. He is the red zone threat, and so I honestly feel pretty good having him here as my wide receiver 1. He may not be the most consistent player, but I really think he can repeat with his overall receiving volume and touchdown upside this year. So after we picked Mike Evans, it was 3 wide receivers who came off: McLaurin, Lamb, Allen Robinson. We also saw 2 quarterbacks, Lamar and Kyler, go in the 4th round, a pair of running backs, Jacobs and Sanders, and then Amari Cooper thrown in there as well. And then the 5th round was a solid mix of wide receivers and running backs. Honestly, kind of wishing some of these running backs fell to us, but I'm not super worried. Right now, we've got 2 running backs, 1 wide receiver, and 1 tight end. And honestly, we could go quarterback with this slot. Dak Prescott is still on the board. I think he's going to be putting up top numbers this year, but I do think we just need to look at the other positions as well. So looking at running back, we've got Mike Davis, Damian Harris. I think both of those guys are very solid picks. They're going to be getting a lot of volume on the ground. And then at wide receiver, we have Cooper Kupp, who I think is definitely a better option in PPR scoring, but still a solid pick here. Thielen, Lockett, Deontay Johnson, T. Higgins. I think Cooper Kupp might be the pick here just because I don't think he's going to make it into round 6. He'll probably be picked within the next 2 selections, and I really think he's a solid guy. He's going to go out. He's going to have the volume. The question really is the touchdowns. He scored the touchdowns in 2019. He did not in 2020. Only 3 touchdowns last season. But with Matthew Stafford coming in, I think this offense as a whole is going to be much better, and I think Cooper Kupp is definitely going to benefit from that. So I feel pretty solid having him here as my wide receiver 2 behind Mike Evans. After we picked Kupp, it was Mike Davis and Mark Andrews that went off the board. So some of our guys that we're interested in are still there. Dak, still on the board, and then also Damian Harris. If you're looking at Damian Harris, standard scoring is the perfect system for him because he's basically going to have 0 involvement in the receiving game. He's going to be scoring all of his points on the ground. And then also, with Cam Newton no longer being the starting quarterback, those goal line opportunities are now opened up for Damian Harris, which he did not have last season. And I'm just concerned that if I don't pick Damian Harris here, there's going to be 16 or 18 selections before our next pick in the 7th round. And then, who knows what I'm going to be looking at? Ronald Jones, Melvin Gordon, Trey Sermon. It could be those guys, and I just don't like those options as my running back 3. So I think I'm going to have to go with Damian Harris here, and then I'm going to have to just snag a quarterback later in the draft, which I'm totally fine doing because I love Brady, Tannehill, Stafford, all those guys in the later rounds. So it's got to be Damian Harris here, and we just kind of have to hope that they're not going to go into a full committee. I do think that Harris is going to be the lead back. Obviously, some other players are going to be involved. James White is going to be the receiving guy, but I think when we're looking at volume on the ground and touchdown upside, Harris is going to be the guy for the Patriots. Picks were all over in round 6 and round 5. We saw the second group of those tight ends come off. So it was Andrews, Hockenson, and Pitts all going in the 6th round. There were also some quarterbacks that went off in the 7th. Wilson, Hurts, Rodgers. that Hurts pick is definitely a reach, and so I wonder if that left someone solid on the board. I do not see that Justin Herbert has been drafted, and he has not, so that's definitely a top candidate for this pick here. We also have Chase Claypool, who is still available at wide receiver. He's kind of another player, just like Damian Harris, where standard scoring is definitely like his best setting, just because he's not going to be a volume receiver. He's more of a big play guy. He's going to have a lot of touchdown upside. So those are probably the top two guys that I would be looking at here. But I do think I'm going to have to snag Justin Herbert just because I do think he's going to be picked if I don't select him here. It would hurt to lose out on Chase Claypool, but I wouldn't feel terrible going out and getting like a Kenny Golladay potentially. You could rest him on the bench, wait for him to get healthy, and then plug him into your lineup. Whereas Justin Herbert, even though I love Tom Brady this year for fantasy, I do think there's a pretty decent cushion between Herbert and Brady. So Herbert is going to be the guy here, and that's actually going to wrap up my starting lineup, and it's looking to be a pretty nice setup. Herbert, Taylor, CEH, Mike Evans, Cooper Kupp, Travis Kelce, and Damian Harris. Wow, so this worked out perfectly. The team did go with a quarterback, so we wouldn't have been able to wait for Herbert. They went out and got Tannehill and then Odell Beckham, and that means that Chase Claypool is still on the board. There is a little bit of a problem with picking Claypool, and that's just that our RB4 is definitely going to be lacking, but I don't think that's the worst thing in the world. We could be going out and getting a handcuff, some of these guys in the later 30s, but really the value here with Claypool is just too good to pass up. We could also go with Kenny Golladay, but his, hamstring injury is really starting to concern me, so I'd rather just go out and get the healthy guy who is the perfect fit for a standard scoring league. Same with Kenny Golladay, but you know what I mean, the touchdown upside on this guy. He should continue improving from his rookie year, and I personally do not think that Big Ben is as washed up as everyone wants to believe. So in rounds 8 and 9, it was all running backs and wide receivers, no quarterbacks, no tight ends, and we're probably going to be looking at either a running back or a wide receiver, so we really just have to take a look and see who's on the board. Right now we have an even split, 3 running backs, 3 wide receivers. Looking at the RB position, we've got Zach Moss, Michael Carter, Jamal Williams, Devin Singletary. I mean, if I'm being honest, these are not a ton of top options. This is not something that I love to see. Wide receiver, there's definitely still some players on the board. Juju, Tyler Boyd, Will Fuller, Chark, Davis, Brown. I would really like Antonio Brown here, or even Will Fuller, because I do think he's more of a big play guy, doesn't need that volume. But here's the thing, since there are a lot of wide receivers on the board, I may just go out and get my running back 4. The question here is it going to be Zach Moss? He's probably going to be the running back 1 for this Bills team, but I really think they're just not going to run the ball. I mean, we saw in that preseason game where Josh Allen played, they didn't rush the ball one time the entire first quarter, so that's definitely concerning if you're a Zach Moss owner, but I mean, this is really slim pickings here. Michael Carter, no thank you. I feel like he's the RB3 in that Jets backfield. Jamal Williams, honestly, would not be the worst pick here. He is more of a pass-catching guy, but I don't think that would be a terrible selection. Devin Singletary, not interested. And then you're just kind of getting into the handcuff players. So I actually think I'm going to go with Jamal Williams. Kind of talked myself into it. DeAndre Swift, still seemingly injured. We don't know if he's going to be ready for week 1. So, maybe he's able to carve out a decent role in this offense. And there's just really not a lot of weapons on this team. So if he's able to, start the first few games of the season, put up solid numbers, I think he can really just push himself into that lineup and force himself in there to get touches. Obviously not like a high ceiling play because this Lions offense is not going to come with a lot of touchdowns, but a decent player to be an RB4. So we saw Michael Carter and then DJ Chark go off at the turn, which means it's our selection for the 10th round. Right now, we've got 4 running backs, 3 wide receivers, so I am going to hone in here on the wide receiver position. And the question really is between Will Fuller and Antonio Brown. I'm leaning AB just because I feel pretty confident that he's going to go out and get 1,000+ yards this season. I really think it's going to happen. And then we're just looking at how explosive this Tampa Bay offense is going to be. I really think he has a solid shot at getting 6+ touchdowns. So as my wide receiver 4, 1,000-yard receiver, 6+ touchdowns. I really like that compared to Will Fuller, which I just don't know how to project what he's going to do this season. He was great last year. Then he obviously gets suspended for PEDs. How much did that factor into his play? Also, it was one of the few years that he hadn't had a ton of injuries, so did it help with that? And then you just don't know how he's going to fit into this Dolphins offense. I still like Will Fuller as a pick, but those are just kind of the negatives that lead me to pick AB here. After we picked AB, the 10th round was a mix of running backs and wide receivers, and then in the 11th, we really saw these teams go out and start to get their tight ends, these late round guys, Logan Thomas, Robert Tonyan, Noah Fant, and Tyler Higbee. So it is our 11th round pick. Right now, we've got 4 running backs, 4 wide receivers. We could be in this range where we're going out and getting a handcuff for our players. The rough part here is we don't have ideal handcuffs for Jonathan Taylor. Is it Marlon Mack? Is it Jordan Wilkins? You also have Nyheim Hines there. I don't think Hines is going to take, a lot of the carries. He kind of has himself established as the receiving back. So I don't even know if I really want to get involved with any of those guys. For CEH, I guess you could go with Darrell Williams. Wouldn't be the worst pick in the world, but it also might be a little bit of a reach here. And I think we'd be losing out on value elsewhere. And then our guy Damian Harris, I'm not trying to buy into that potential committee for the Patriots in terms of the backup guys. Like, I don't want to pick Ramondre Stevenson or James White, especially for James White in standard scoring. He's going to basically have no standalone value. Ooh, something actually just stuck out to me here looking at the wide receivers. We still have Michael Thomas and Marquez Callaway on the board. I think I did this in my last mock, but I may just try to snag these 2 players with my next 2 picks because there is just going to be the 2 other selections on the turn. I already feel confident with the 4 wide receivers that I have, so I think I can make it, whatever the 6 to 8 weeks that Michael Thomas is going to be out for. So I'm going to snag MT with this pick. Obviously, the key here is that Callaway falls, but he is going to be the wide receiver 1 for as long as Michael Thomas is out. So that's going to lead me to have 6 wide receivers, and I could basically just be done at the position. All right, that is what we'd like to see. The team at the turn went back-to-back handcuff running backs with Pollard and Latavius Murray, which means that Marquez Callaway is still on the board. He is going to be the number 1 for the Saints. I think he is still being undervalued. Even though his ADP has been way pushed up recently, I think he should still be going earlier than he is. I've been snagging him in a ton of my redraft leagues, and I'm going to get him here too. And that's basically going to wrap up our receiver room most likely. The 12th round was just dominated by these low-end handcuff running backs. So Madison, Hines, White, Coleman, McKissick, Penny, and Bernard all went off in the 12th. And then we saw Marquise Brown go in the 13th. And then 4 of these kind of backup tight ends, Gesicki, Gronk, Jonnu, and Blake Jarwin. And then 3 quarterbacks, Stafford, Brady, and Burrow. So let's see who is on the board for this pick. We're basically done at wide receiver unless there's some absurd value on the table. Even though I talked about how our team doesn't have the best kind of handcuff running backs, Darrell Williams is still on the board here, and I do believe he is the number 2 for the Chiefs. But at this point in the draft, with the running backs available, I would much rather go out and draft our handcuff than like a Damian Williams or a Salvon Ahmed. So I do think Darrell is going to be the pick here. Also, it just helped because our running back room isn't the deepest, and so it is nice to have that extra security. After Williams, it was Trevor Lawrence and Jarvis Landry off the board. Honestly, not sure how Landry was still available. That seems to be like some pretty crazy value at the wide receiver position in the 14th round. But, we're locked in at wide receiver, and this is going to be our last pick of the draft. And I think I'm going to go out and get a backup QB, but not just one of these kind of low-end ones. Like, I'm not going to go out and get Ryan or Cousins. Those guys are solid and super flex, but they just don't have a lot of upside in 1 quarterback leagues. So I'm going to go out and snag Trey Lance, who I think has a ton of upside. And I don't need to start him right away because I do have Justin Fields. We don't know how long he's going to be the backup. When is he going to come in as the starter? I don't think anyone is quite sure, but I do think he will see the field this year. And when he does, he's going to have a ton of rushing upside. And I do think we'll have top 12 quarterback upside. All right, so this is our final roster. Don't pay attention to the grade. It just grades you on how well you follow their ADP, but that's not what we're trying to do. We're trying to do our own picks. And so quarterback, Justin Herbert. Running backs, Jonathan Taylor and Clyde Edwards-Helaire. Wide receivers, Mike Evans and Cooper Kupp. We have Travis Kelce at tight end, Damian Harris in the flex. And then our bench is Chase Claypool, Jamal Williams, Antonio Brown, Michael Thomas, Marquez Callaway, Darrell Williams, and Trey Lance. I honestly feel really solid with this team. I think this is a nice lineup. I really like our bench. We have a ton of depth there. So I think this went pretty well. Let me know what you guys think down below in the comment section. If you stuck around until the end of the video, please just leave a like and subscribe to the channel. That really helps support me, and I would appreciate it. But that's all I have for today. Thank you guys, and I'll see you next time.